All right, welcome to Backyard Brothers podcast. Our usual host is not available tonight, and Scott, and so we're running with us three. And we're Scott has put some comments down in text that we'll include in these as we discuss different things, and then he'll have the opportunity to watch, and we'll comment offline and talk about our different opinions and everything that we talked about and that he had to say based on what we talked about tonight. And it's going to be a good time. But just us three, we'll recap a few different things, including NBA Finals, a few mentions in the NBA, and some other things before we get into our debating, weekly debating that we started. But first of all, we're going to talk about a memory that Yancey has prepared. Yancey, let's go.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the 2010 six-touchdown performance of Michael Vick. He was with the Eagles. This performance was against the Washington Redskins. I think I didn't look up their record, though I should have, but I'm pretty sure that team was a stink fest at that time, right? They had Clinton Portis. They had a good offense, but the defense, though they had good defensive teammates, they'd never played well, and their record showed it, if memory serves, for that season. But Michael Vick absolutely eviscerated that defense in that game for, like I said, 6 touchdowns. I can't remember if it was an even split passing and rushing, but I do know that he generated 6 touchdowns in that game. And in watching the highlights, you could just tell that he was faster than everybody on the defensive side of the ball and was making good decisions, making good throws in that game. And I wanted to bring this memory up, particularly, I think a lot of people nowadays remember Michael Vick for mistreating dogs. I think most of that was his cousins, but his money. And so not to say that what he did was okay, but it does suck to me that it tarnished the incredible level of play that we saw from him in the NFL, separate of his personal life. The guy was easily, I feel like, a Hall of Famer, and just changed the way kids wanted to play quarterback for the next few generations. Gave us guys like Cam Newton, I believe. Without like Mike Vick, you wouldn't have a kid like Cam Newton who wouldn't be turned into a linebacker or something like that, because he showed the ability to have speed, size, and just an overall field general that you hadn't seen from a running back type quarterback, I guess is how they described him or prototyped him. And so much so to the point he changed the game overall. And so I wanted to take time to look at where he did that specifically later in his career when he was with the Eagles as opposed to with the Falcons. Because I feel like he never was the same after prison, but he was still incredible and on another level compared to guys that were throughout the league, even at the time that he was doing that, alongside with guys like Donovan McNabb, Steve McNair, guys who were, in my opinion, as good of quarterbacks, but just not as athletically talented as Michael Vick was. So just wanted to shine a light on that game, get your guys' thoughts about Michael Vick as a player overall and that performance.
Yeah, I can go next. Michael Vick was, him among a few others, were some of the first football players that I knew. I recognized the name growing up. It was Michael Vick. Oh, I know exactly who that is. It was him and among others such as Brett Favre and other people like that. But the difference is that there's really only probably 2 quarterbacks I think of who have changed the game, changed the quarterback position. Michael Vick being the second one of those. The first one being probably would be Vince Young. So I think of Vince Young, who is very similar to that kind of play style, and he changed the game. He brought that kind of style, but then it wasn't popular. Michael Vick was the next one, and just made that just a phenomenal kind of play style to watch. Nowadays, it's very common. It's popular. That's really kind of the type of position it's become, is this type of mobile QB, kind of roll off the side and then off-platform throws. That's kind of what's expected and looked for nowadays. Back when Michael Vick was playing, that was a rare sight. and he mastered it. He was absolutely beautiful the way he did it. And I mean, he's just a good guy. I know this, like we were saying, this whole dogfighting thing to tarnish his legacy. But it, like you said, Yancey, it wasn't really him who did that. But I think that if we were to do a Mount Rushmore of mobile QBs, he'd be easily the first or second one on there, with Vince Young being one of those as well.
Yeah, I mean, Cody, you said a Mount Rushmore of mobile QBs. I mean, just QBs in general. I mean, he may make a top 10 list based on his things that he's done. It's, I mean, his career achievements, being an MVP is fantastic. I remember, probably somewhere around the same time frame that you're talking about, the 6 touchdown game, and there's another game I think around that same year against the Giants where, with like 3 minutes left in the game, they're down by 3 touchdowns and they came back and won, led by Vick. And so the 6 touchdown game plus these all that time, really invigorated his legacy and his place in the league. I remember around that time I had a Vick jersey, and it was the Eagles jersey. I had a Vick jersey. I would wear it fairly often, and probably 80 to 90% of the comments I got were from old white women who hated me now because I was wearing a Vick jersey, right? Because they only remember him as the dog fighter. But I love the polarizing player he was as this. Like, it's not fair that we got to try to tackle this guy and he can then chuck it 60 yards down the field in a perfect pass, or run 60 yards down the field and score a touchdown. And defenses hated playing against him. And when he was in Atlanta, especially, and then after he broke his leg, he wasn't quite the same. And then after his stint, he wasn't quite the same. But then he had these moments in Philly where he was the same, just like you called it out there. And I loved watching him play. He was absolutely one of my favorite players to watch. And this 6 touchdown game, like you said, is one of those moments where it's just like, man, this is great. And I believe different publications have said that I forget what year, but the Madden, whatever year, that year of player, Michael Vick was the greatest video game player Madden had ever created. That there's never been anyone with the highest rating, ever as good, ever as unstoppable in Madden as Michael Vick was, and I forget what year it was.
I lost a lot of friends over Madden 04 picking the Falcons. I'll say that flat out. Not afraid. You can call me a cheater all you want. You got to stop the option in the NFL if I'm playing you.
That was it, Madden 04.
Yeah, and then the next year was Ray Lewis 05, if memory serves. Yeah. We're right in my realm of autism. I can go through all of these.
So Madden 04, Mike Vick was the greatest video game character for Madden ever created. He was absolutely unstoppable. 99 speed, 99 throw accuracy, 99 throw power. And he wasn't a creative player. That's what he was.
Yeah, 100%.
Good, great memory. I'd have to go back and watch some more of his Philly highlights. That Giants game is the one that I've always watched. I've always liked because it's just fun to see that what he did there. But this Redskins game you're talking about, I'll have to make sure I look it up again.
Him and Brett Favre in the playoffs when they faced off was a really good one too. If you're just looking for great Mike Vick performances, that's in the top 5 list of mine.
Practically can't go wrong if you just look up Mike Vick. You're going to see great performances in every single one.
Yeah. All right, so the NBA Finals concluded Monday night. The Celtics won. They won handedly, won the series 4-1, and are the newest titles, and were able to raise banner number 18, now leading the league in total championships with 18. But this is the first one since 2008. And the 2008 was the first one since 86. And so they've had 2 in 40 years and 16 in the previous years. And so to break down a little bit of the series and also what we as a a podcast shows, Cody got it right on the nose with Celtics in 5. Yancey and Scott both chose Celtics and Celtics to win. I chose the Mavericks to win. Looking back now, the Mavericks did not play quite as well as I thought they would have. All credit to the Celtics there. Can get a couple thoughts from you on just just a recap of the NBA Finals, some thoughts you have, and then I can bring that home before we move on to the next segment.
A lot of what I saw was, I think what we thought going into it, that the Celtics were kind of untested, but definitely better. From what we could tell, just overall, they had played better against everybody in the East, but was that going to hold up in the West? And it turned out that they were just better than the Mavericks. They had that game where they slipped up and really couldn't generate any kind of offense. But I want to put a lot of that on Porzingis being out, because it was day and night. It was two different Celtic teams. They were denying a lot more of those lob passes that, Dustin, you pointed out that they needed to have success. And they were able to just shut down a lot of things with Porzingis that they could not, apparently, for that one game, shut down without him. And overall, I think that was a huge difference maker in that game and in that series. And I think Jaylen Brown was incredible throughout the entire playoffs. Not only just this series where he was phenomenal, but just the entire playoffs. I think he stepped up and delivered for his team, on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and we'd already mentioned that I got it right in 5, and that's exactly what I thought would happen, is that there'd be the 3 wins by the Celtics, and I was thinking that the Mavericks are going to get 1 win in there. It just made sense to me that they're going to be able to make that adjustment, and they did. But I mean, although they were theoretically untested, we also knew they were just the best team in this league, and the season had shown it. They lost 12 games, I think is what it was, something like that in the season.
I think it was 16. I think they're like.
Well, okay.
I forget what it was.
Under 20 though, so under 20.
Something like that.
And so we knew that they were good, but however untested they were, and that they were going to be in the championship. So other than being the champions, the Celtics are also the champions of adjustments. They adjusted very well every game to the adjustments that the Mavericks were doing, until what was Game 4. The Mavericks were able to, and I'm not sure exactly what they did, but they found a way just to destroy the Celtics. They adjust really well. But next game, Game 5, the Celtics start, all right, we're not going to let that happen again. We're going to close this out right away, and they just adjusted even better. They're a good team. They work well together. They have all-stars, but they know the all-stars know how to work as a team better in a way. And so you just can't beat that kind of team when you have all-stars and they work as a team as well as they did, and they're the champions of adjustments. You're not going to Game 6 in that.
Yeah, I do want to echo Yancey what you said. Porzingis being out in that Game 4 was, I think, they had struggled to adjust to that, even though he'd missed a lot of games during the playoffs. They struggled to adjust to that. And then Mavericks had a hot night in Game 4, and Celtics had struggled. They're just out of their rhythm the whole game, and Mavericks were able to take advantage of that. But then back in Game 5 and all throughout the rest of that, Celtics, I think, displayed spacing so extremely well that they stretched the floor, made the Mavericks defense so thin and so vulnerable to drive penetration and to open threes and so many other different staples of today's game. The Celtics did that so great. They understood player positioning and rotation and all of that on the offensive end in order to keep that spacing, in order to prevent their players getting bunched up and the defense being able to recover. And so they're so extremely good at that. And they had a great season, did that all year round, and then displayed it to the absolute topmost during the finals. And so all credit to them. Jaylen Brown absolutely played out of his mind all throughout the playoffs. He won the Eastern Conference MVP, which happens to be the Larry Bird Eastern Conference MVP, and then also the Finals MVP, which is the Bill Russell MVP. So, multiple Celtics there. All the MVPs named after multiple Celtics, and for him to get it there as a Celtic himself, that's incredible honor, I'm sure, that he feels. So it's a great season. I'm sad the basketball's done, but we go straight into the Olympics starting in a few weeks with NBA basketball starting. So I'm excited to see Team USA basketball. A lot of these players coming back to do that, to watch that for a few weeks. All right. And on to NHL, the Stanley Cup. We thought that this may be a similar situation with Florida being up 3-1, but then Edmonton was able to win the game and force a Game 6 back in Edmonton. And so they now have the opportunity to try to force a Game 7 on their home arena, on their home rink. I know neither of us are hockey fans for the most part, but it's exciting to see a team on the brink of elimination win and force another one. Any thoughts on this, Florida and Edmonton?
I actually looked up a highlight or two over the week, so that way I could know what I was talking about a little bit, because I did see that occurred and I was interested in it. The final score of the last game was 5-3, I think, but the last goal was scored with like 17 seconds left. So Edmonton, though they made it look like there was more space in the game than there really was, it was a very close contest until the last 17 seconds, where they put up that extra goal and basically sealed it off. That's really all I could add to the conversation. But I did want to mention that it was a close game until the last 17 seconds, where they went up by 2 instead of 1.
I think the only thing I want to add or say is, I'm excited because I'm the only one who said Edmonton was going to win this, and so I'm like, all right, are they going to come back and do this? I don't remember if Scott had mentioned, because I know we had said in basketball it's never happened where the losing team won 4 straight in a row. When Edmonton has this opportunity to, I'm not sure if it's happened in hockey or not. I think Scott said it may have happened. I'm not sure, but they have this up. What's that?
It has happened. It's not 4 in a row. They're up 3-1. So they don't need to win. They need to win 3 in a row, which has happened in both sports. In basketball, it's only happened one time. When the Cavaliers did it against the Warriors in 2016. But in hockey, it's happened several times.
Okay. Well, Edmonton has the opportunity to do that. I'm the lone, like I said, I'm the lone guesser there. So let's see if I can get lucky and have both the NBA championship and the NHL championship under my name.
Good. All right, we'll see. I believe the next game is either tomorrow or Friday night. So keep your eyes out for that, so we can recap it in the following week. All right, on to just some news to discuss. Make sure I get some of these names right real quick.
This is what the NSA sees.
All right. So first little bit of news is Jeff Van Gundy, back in the NBA. He's back into an assistant coach role with the Los Angeles Clippers. He made a name for himself during the 90s with the Knicks, and both as an assistant and a head coach in the Knicks, led the Knicks to the finals, losing to the Spurs in the 99 finals. And then was in the league coaching both the Knicks and I think a couple other teams before being a broadcaster, being kind of the color commentator for years. I believe for the ESPN broadcast, him and Mark Jackson together which I've always hated listening to Jeff Van Gundy. I thought he was so annoying. I hated listening to his games because he had all these wild opinions, but him and Mark Jackson would just argue back and forth the entire game. And so it was a little bit fun in that way, but I'm not afraid to admit that I watched a few of his games muted because I didn't like to listen to him. But the news is that he's back in a coaching role as an assistant coach with the Clippers. Like I said, he's had success before, and then he's been involved in the NBA for a very long time.
I think. Sorry about that. So I think I'll just go next. I guess my first question is, when did he go to broadcasting? When did that first happen?
Oh, it was probably early 2010s, maybe
Okay.
2012, 13, maybe early.
So my thought then is more of a question, I think, to you, Dustin. This is a thing where the Clippers hiring a big name, right? They hire a big name and kind of get some movement in the fan base, movement in the locker room. But with the fact that games change over the years, the type of game changes. Is he going to be a good coach? Is he still going to be the coach that he used to be, or has the game changed in a way so much that he's not going to be the same old coach he used to be?
My comment to that is he's never been a good coach. So that nothing's going to change there. He got the Knicks to the finals in '99, but he took over during the Knicks' heyday. Like, it wasn't that he built this team back up. He came in as the coach in like 96, 97, and this is the height of the Knicks' heyday when they had Patrick Ewing and Latrell Sprewell. And all these are their players. And then that 99 season was a holdout season, and they only played like 50 games, and the Knicks were a middle-of-the-pack team that then went on a run during the playoffs. And so, yes, getting to the finals is a great thing as a coach, but there's a lot of things to consider about that specific season and that specific tenure as his time in the Knicks coach, and then the other teams that he bounced around. So anyway, that's my thought, is I don't think he's ever been that great of a coach, but I have that opinion about a lot of different people that have coaching positions, and here I am not having one. So,
what about his time with Houston? I mean, that was a good squad there. Was that something he came into, or?
Yeah, I don't remember how he came into that, but obviously, yeah, that was some great teams with Yao Ming and T-Mac, and
franchise.
Great teams, a franchise there that he helped lead several seasons, but once again, they were never a deep playoff contending team. That's a team that those teams several years there was always a team that I felt was underwhelming. That when you have players of that talent, multiple Hall of Famers, that to never be able to achieve to the highest level. Obviously, both of their stars in McGrady and Ming had injury issues all throughout their careers that hampered their playoff runs. So it's again, I think it just goes to show that getting to the finals and winning the finals is so incredibly difficult, and it takes so much luck. And I think that with any sport, winning a championship, whatever sport is, takes a great amount of luck. And so I don't want to count out Van Gundy based on a lot of different factors. But I've never been a fan of him in general.
Just curious.
And then Monty Williams was fired. Sorry, forgive me as I make sure.
How are we going to find out who the father is now? Hell, before your time, Cody. Don't worry, it's a great.
I guess so.
Yeah, way before your time, and trailer trash TV you should never watch.
Yeah. So Monty Williams is fired. He was the Pistons head coach. Obviously, the Pistons had terrible season, terrible record, not greatly set up for success. But this is another one of those coaching carousel things that we see happen a lot. That he was there for one season. That they didn't give him they gave him one season with a dilapidated roster to say, okay, give us some success, and it didn't happen, and they fired him. And so I feel bad for Monty Williams put in this situation and then immediately fired as a result. You got to give coaches time, and I think we've all mentioned that before.
Yeah, I think it goes with the same, like you said, Dustin, we've mentioned this before. We've had a conversation about this with like NFL coaches or college football coaches, and my opinion has always been 3 seasons, at least 3 seasons. The first season you come in, you're just trying to figure out what needs to happen. What is the culture going to be? Who's on your roster? What do you need to do and change? The second season is getting that rolling, and the third season should be, this is my product now. And so that should be the expectation for every coach, of course, unless there's something absolutely, unless Nathaniel Hackett or something like that kind of happens, whatever. But almost in every case, I'll have the opinion at least 3 seasons is needed. And so I feel bad for the guy. No one knows if if he could have turned that team around because they didn't give him the chance to be able to do it.
Yeah, that's rough. And I mean, in professional sports, it's a revolving door. It's one of those jobs. I mean, even if you go to like the JUCO level of, junior college level, coaches get cycled in and out because that's what sometimes we're in this mindset that the coach has enough influence to direct a team to being good or not. And really, being a successful team has a ton of factors, and very little to do with the coach unless he's an idiot. Any coach with half a brain that has a roster with, let's see, in football, I need 7 talented dudes on each side of the ball, and the other 4, I just need heartbeats that will do what I say. In basketball, those numbers dwindle. I need like on the court, I need 2 dudes who will shock, surprise, and sell tickets, and 3 heartbeats. And that's really it. If you understand it all, what is happening on the court, that should be the case. And to agree with you, Cody, a year is not enough time to even understand what's going on. You're just getting tossed into this whole new universe and trying to decide like who your role players are, who your stars are. Is your owner a good person? Like, there's a lot to figure out as a coach, and I think we throw all of that on them the day they walk in the door and expect them to find success. And that's what happened to this guy, and it just happened to go the other way. I mean, Cade Cunningham could be a star in a few years. He just didn't have a supporting cast or enough, let's say, coaching talent to drive everybody to say, hey, we're all doing what Cade says because he's the athlete here and follow his lead, or something like that to that effect. And he didn't have time to develop any of that. So it's just unfortunate that he was high-buyed so quick,
Yeah, I think to back up your point, looking at some of the teams in the NBA or even in the NFL that have won championships recently, usually those coaches have been coaching those teams for multiple seasons before that championship occurred. Obviously, they're having success through that, but all throughout history, usually there's multiple years of the coach with the team before that success is seen. And so there needs to be some time to build, some time for patience. Last week we talked about the UConn coach Dan Hurley turning down the Lakers job, and I mentioned like they offered him a 6-year deal, and it's like that's not a 6-year deal. Like it's a depends on how good your season was deal, and that's how it seems to be, which we've commented on before that it's unfortunate. And yeah, there's got to be some. We've got to have some understanding that the contract's got to be on both sides. That if the general manager, if the team says, hey, I'm going to offer you a 3-year deal, they've got to stick with that too. All right, moving on. We're moving through fast today, but that's all right. We don't need to take up a full time. So a quick comment. Neither of us are necessarily great fans of baseball, although more into it than hockey. But a legend of baseball died this week. Willie Mays played in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and is one of those legends. As I looked up some biography, this is a man that was part of the All-Star game 24 consecutive seasons, which consecutive is an incredible word for anything in sports. To be at the top tier in your league every single year consecutive for 24 years. I mean, it's incredible to think about that. Comments from you guys?
Yeah, just condolences to his family, and I'm sure that we'll see the MLB putting on some tributes, hopefully, to him. And just to echo what you said, 24 years in any sport, consecutive All-Star appearances is absolutely incredible, and not to be under touted in any respect.
Yeah, really just to add, every sport has its foundational players. Although we don't know Willie Mays very well, I am aware and I understand, how much of a legend he was. Baseball has people like Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron, Cal Ripken Jr., and Willie Mays, who in one way or another changed the sport. So it's important to recognize that, no matter if you're a fan or know it very well, it's important to recognize that this is still an athlete, an all-time legend for this sport and for all sports.
Great. Guys, any other topics we should discuss before we get into our PTI segment?
I think we hit them all. Did we say any of Scott's stuff?
Let's see. Oh yeah, he has some stuff that we did not mention. So let's quickly get Scott's recap in here. So apologize to Scott when he figures this out, and to everyone else too. But I'll read off his comments on the Michael Vick memory. What he says here, he says, everyone thinks about him when he was on the Falcons, but he was as good as ever on the Eagles as well. He is the measuring stick for whom all running quarterbacks are compared to. I don't think he was only a running back like some people think Lamar Jackson is. Vick had a cannon for an arm, could throw it a mile into a bucket. He is as talented a quarterback as any in the Hall of Fame, and if it wasn't for his dogfighting scandal, I think he may already have been inducted. I think that's fairly similar to some of the comments that we have, that there's, we want him to be a Hall of Famer, and I hope that he is at some point.
He has to be. I mean, it would be a disgrace to football if he's not.
Yep, there's plenty of people that say it'd be a disgrace to dogs if he is.
Yeah, but you'll own them.
All right, so his comments on NBA Finals. We all were a little concerned with how easy the Celtics' path to the finals was, but the NBA Finals was just as easy. Maybe we should stop making excuses for how easy it was and just clearly accept that the Celtics were the best team in the NBA this season, and it wasn't even close. You can't blame the Celtics for other teams having players out. You can only play the teams they play in front of you, and the Celtics dominated their opponents in these playoffs. They finished with a playoff record of 16-3. You combine all 4 playoff series they played, and they still didn't lose enough games to be eliminated in a best-of-7 series. That's utter domination. They had the perfect combination of a great perimeter defense, timely scoring, great three-point shooting, and a couple of superstars who could get you buckets when they needed them. We'll talk NBA review next week, but I think it's safe to say that the Celtics will be a huge threat to repeat next year, too. And echoing some of the comments that we have, but I also think, it's when you have like you said, with next year, it'll be interesting to see what moves in the offseason the Celtics as well as other teams make, and we'll talk about that. But Yeah, this is the team that doesn't look like they have players that are going to be going anywhere anytime soon. They have a pretty combined core that's well put together, and they'll be the defending champs, and they'll be very dangerous defending champs.
Other than Al Horford, do you see anybody kind of aging out? And maybe not Al Horford. I could be speaking out of school or a little too soon there, but I don't know. I'm 35. I see him.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe Al Horford's in a little bit better shape, but
a little. Maybe a little. I still do sit-ups, bro.
Yeah, Al Horford is definitely nearing retirement age for NBA players, and I think with this cap on his career, I wouldn't be surprised if he does retire either this season or within the next couple of seasons with this cap here, and and that it's a finals season that he was a great contributor in. That he wasn't, the old guy that sat on the bench and then was able to collect a ring, that he was a great contributor. And so I'm happy to see him get this ring. I think he was ranked in like top number 2 or number 3 in most playoff games played without an NBA title. Number 1 being Karl Malone and number 2, John Stockton. And so, those guys, he was up there in that company. And so great that he was able to get off that list. So he's a guy that's easy to like, and I'm watching the after game as different players, give their speeches. A lot of them called out Al and saying, how great of a teammate. I think I forget if it was Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum that said like he's my favorite teammate that I've ever had is Al Horford.
That's cool.
Which is cool. He's my favorite teammate I've ever had. And so that's great, and I think it shows his great leadership ability. And Al has, as he said, so many playoff games that he's been the leader of every organization he's been a part of. All right, moving on to our debating segment with our little PTI. So leading off with something here. This is kind of a hypothetical what if scenario, and so with all the teams changing in college football recently, the Pac-12 is basically disappeared now after these teams have left, and the Big 12 is dissolving and starting to create these kind of mega conferences. I forget how many teams are in the SEC, but it's 16 or 18 teams at this point. Because all these teams want the ability to play against other tough competition in order to build up their resumes in order to get that. And so this hypothetical in mind that I think could become real in the past is that we can have debate over is that sometime in the near future, what we see as college football currently is going to go away. That these mega schools who basically make all of their money for their school's athletic department through football are going to combine together into just a league that is separate from the NCAA. That these teams such as Alabama, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Florida, Clemson, whatever it is, maybe a collection of 30 teams creating their own league, only playing each other, having a championship that comes out of that. And then we're going to see basically all the money that currently exists in college football just being within that league, because those are what people want to see. And that's gonna basically dissolve the college football system as we see it, and we're going to have maybe junior leagues and other things like that. My personal opinion on that is that could be great for the sport of college football, that it would create greater parity, it would create greater competition. It would create players who are more loyal to a certain school, and instead of jumping around getting different education in different places in order to chase a football, that they're staying loyal to one school and actually getting an education from the same school in order to progress through that, and then would set up the opportunity for these different schools to create junior leagues in order to keep going, in order to farm into this. I think that it would be a good thing, and also I'm not a fan of the NCAA, and so to see them crash and burn would be really fun. Now, I believe there's probably some debate, maybe some disagreement there. If there is, let's hear it. Cody, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I, for the first time in this PTA, I'm more of a neutral stance. And the reason why is really, first off, I agree with the NCAA should crash and burn. No one likes it anyway. It's a horrible, horrible governing body. It sucks. It sucks at what it does. But as a business, because that's what it is, as a business, this mega conference idea, or god tier, if you will, would be great. Yeah, as a business, right? For the sport, it would be bad. And it's different, right? It's a business, and then there's a sport about it as well. Obviously, for a business, yeah, everyone wants to see the Alabama and the Michigan playing, the Ohio State Michigan rivalry. They want to see those big games. They want to see the mattering late in the season. They want to see that stuff, and that's what's going to bring the money. That's what's going to be the fun part about it. That's where the business was driven. That's where they're going to get their money. Everyone's going to be watching that, and no one's going to be watching. I mean, first person I can think of is maybe Utah State. No one's watching Utah State play Wyoming, because why watch that when you can watch Georgia take on Penn State? I mean, that's going to be a good game. Why would you want to watch that? And that's going to hurt those schools' revenue. It's going to hurt those schools' ability to play football and to play any other sport as well. It's going to hurt their ability to give student athletes this opportunity to play and to essentially receive an education, because that's what it's about in the end, which a lot of people say it's not. But in reality, people are going to school, especially these Group of 5 schools, to get education. When you're going to these SEC Big Ten schools, it's not about that at that point. They're going because they get paid for it, and they're going to go to the NFL. But it's good for business. It's bad for the sport. And I think it's going to happen. And I think it's unfortunate, although there is going to be some good from it. I think that the best way to do it would be to do more of a god tier, if you will, where there's this, mega conference. There's the SEC and Big Ten, and they have whatever it is, 24 teams each or something. And then there's the other league that can still have these same playoff type things, but unfortunately they're not getting the money they need. These players aren't getting the exposure that they need. They're not. That's the bad part of it. That's the part where I disagree with it, and it's not good for the sport, and it's going to hurt it a lot. I don't know what that's going to look like in 5 years, but I don't know if it's going to be good or bad. So that's kind of where I'm neutral in it. Good for business, bad for the sport.
What happened in America when we hated monopolies, where you can't have this one mega structure telling everybody what they have to do, how they have to think, what school is good and deserves all of your money and can get away with breaking every rule and giving a kid an Escalade, and what school can't because they're more worried about science and math. And so I think overall, if we were to, I don't know, this is probably a poor analogy, but if we activated a separation of church and state style thing in sports and college, go to college to learn things, dummy, not to mash your head against other people for money. Wait until you're a competent adult who can make decisions, not a 19-year-old trying to fix your starving family, to go play a sport for somebody who honestly doesn't care about you and is going to make millions of dollars off of your work, sweat, blood, effort. Don't allow them to do that. Separate the two. Say you're here for an education or you're here for a sport, and let's designate which one is which. Because I think something that Scott was saying is that it's great for those kids to get scholarships. But what we don't mention is those kids that get scholarships and then they're revoked because they're physically injured and no longer. And now you have a, I don't know, $7,000 to $12,000 bill, not only from your football equipment for the sport that you You played and generated hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even if you just sat on the bench, you generated money for that school, but you're not getting it, and you now owe us money. It's like the mob loaning you money, breaking your legs, and still saying you owe the money. And we like, because we like the sport and don't want the NCAA to take it from us, we pretend like that's all okay. But to me, it's all garbage nonsense, and they're just lying to our faces and saying, no, 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 we're changing these kids' lives, while they're literally stealing from their pockets in front of us and making them live on ramen. But that's okay, because they might go to the NFL. What they don't say is that might is 0.0003.2% of the population that will be allowed to do that and actually make money and not just sacrifice their bodies. So I think that they need to be separated entirely. And if you're going to educate our young men and women, and that's what you're here for, then do that. Don't tell us how to train them for sport. Shut up about it. And if you are, don't let men swim against women. But that's a totally different topic. And I think that we just gave so much power to the NCAA when they really shouldn't exist, period. Just in general, like, they should be there for oversight, but you shouldn't be allowed to make money off of other people's effort when you aren't doing anything. So I'm to the Joker effect that you are, Dustin. Burn it all down and let's see what happens at the end, because they're robbing from people, and the only reason we let it happen is because we like to watch the kids that want it the most, who want to succeed in this. And that's what makes it great, not anything some dude in office does that says it's okay for these kids to play the sport. Yeah. Hopefully that answered something of what you said. I don't know.
Yeah, it answered some of it. It also sparked new things that I'd love to comment on as well, you know. And I agree with that. And that's a college is supposed to educate you. Why do they care more about what happens on Saturday, you know, and in a stadium? And that bugs me. And just like you said, I don't know if this is a fair comparison, but I think about watching the game on Monday night when the Celtics won, and then they get down there going to present the trophy, and they hand it to some guy I've never heard of. And they're like, "Hey, congratulations, you won this trophy." And it's like, I don't even know who this old white guy is, but apparently he gets to hold the trophy first because he owns the team. It's like, come on. I feel the same way, and so that's how I thought about that, and it's unfortunate that way. Cody, to go back against something you said, you talked about how, you know, there's these mega teams that a lot of people watch, that people who are not fans of Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, whatever it is, if there's a big matchup, they're going to watch that game, right? Because they know that it's great talent. You know who's watching Utah State versus Wyoming? The people who went to Utah State or Wyoming. Absolutely nobody else is watching that game now, nor then, or any other time. Nobody cares unless you went to Utah State or Wyoming. And so there's absolutely nothing that would change with that. Because if you're a casual football fan and you're just scrolling through and you see two teams that you don't know or don't care about, more often than not, you're not going to stop just because it's football. It's usually you got to have some type of team loyalty or something like that there. And so that's my go back to that.
Well, that's kind of my point, though, is that no one is watching it, and especially when all these other big teams are going to be putting on, everyone's being drawn to that. And so what does that do? It takes away the opportunity from these smaller teams who have just amount of right to have their kids being, you know, playing ball and being able to earn their education because of that. It's taken away just as much a right to be able to do that. And to a point where we don't know, because if all the money eventually is going towards the, you know, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, all that, there's no money to even sponsor these other games to play. And then the boosters, the athletic programs fizzle out. They're not even going to be able to do it anymore. They won't be able to have an athletic program. They won't be able to have anyone go on a scholarship to earn education. That won't be there anymore. In about 10, 15 years, they won't have that. That's what's disappointing. That is destroying the sport. That's my point.
Now, I understand. My go back to is that the people that are watching Utah State right now are still going to be watching Utah State because there's nobody outside of fans of Utah State currently watching it, and so nobody's going to leave necessarily, or those small or mid-tier schools, in my opinion.
Right, but because of the conference they're in, they still get money, kind of waterfall down to them. Taking that away, then, they're going to have their Utah State alum watching it until they realize how much of a better game the Alabama-Georgia game is. And then, because let's be honest, if you're a fan of that team, great, you're probably going to watch it, but you're going to want to watch good football too. Eventually, and I'm not saying this is 2-3 years down the road, 10, 15 years down the road, there's not going to be any money left. Utah State, Wyoming, Fresno State, all those teams, their athletic departments are gone now.
You mean when ChatGPT 7 is teaching your kids and you no longer have to pay $40,000 to a brick building with a bunch of idiots in it? So, look, here's my thing. Once we take away the greed from all of this and we're not having this well, that's my team. It'll be back to so remember in high school sports or even Pee-wee when you had to sell candy bars to get your own sporting equipment? The people that truly love this won't let the sport die on the collegiate level. It'll just be up to the boosters to support that and let those kids who love it either do it there under the representation of that team or motivate them to get good enough to go play in those bigger leagues and be seen. And I think that once you separate those two, that will be possible. But until you do that, it will not. And you're going to have these kind of football schools, basketball schools, education schools.
Yeah, kind of that Joker mentality of burn it all down. If 70% of schools have to go back to teaching children, I think that would probably be a good thing.
Oh, no, you mean I can't do the gator chomp because you're going to tell me that I shouldn't hang out with alligators and I should do my taxes? Come on, bro. Give them a bathroom and shut up. Sorry. I'm done. What's the next one?
All right. The next one is, so a few years ago is the NBA 75th anniversary, and they created a list of the 75 greatest players, and I agreed with probably 73 out of the 75 players. There's a couple where I thought, the current players that made the list that I don't think that they've done quite enough in their careers, and one of those players would be Anthony Davis. Fantastic player, won a championship with the Lakers won the Mickey Mouse championship with the Lakers, and his overall very talented player, but him being on the list left out multiple others who were fantastic in their own right. A couple to name a few that I would say would be Tracy McGrady and Dwight Howard. That's my opinion. My stance there is, sorry, Anthony Davis does not yet belong on a 75th anniversary team list. That there are many players, especially Tracy McGrady or Dwight Howard, that belong to that list before him. I would also add in Tony Parker. Wanted to get any feedback. Am I wrong? Am I right? Is there a player I'm missing out? What do you guys think?
So I'm a big fan of Anthony Davis. I've been watching him since he was in UK. I like him. I think he's talented. To your point, I would not put him over the two players that you mentioned. I would put him over Tony Parker because of Tony Parker's supporting cast, but I think that they're similar in that they both had great players around them most of their careers. When Anthony Davis was in New Orleans, I think he did more for that team than Tony Parker was doing for the Spurs, just on talent alone, what he offered. But I overall agree with you that yes, T-Mac and Dwight Howard belong on that list before him, but I agree that he belongs on the list also maybe at some point, but maybe this is a little early to say he belongs there ahead of those guys because we haven't even seen the end of his career. But that's kind of how I'm stuck in the middle there, because I agree and disagree with you for similar reasons that he has had a storied career already and he is a great player, but there are people that deserve it more that probably should get more shine and a harder look to be on that list before him.
I guess just a couple of clarifying questions before I try to get to my answer. Anthony Davis is still playing, right?
Correct.
He's still playing. And this NBA 75, this is more of an accolade and kind of like you're so good, you're on the NBA 75. It's kind of like the same old idea of the NFL all-time 100. Is that the same idea?
Exactly the same idea.
So I'm of the opinion you can't be on that until you're retired. And the only exception that I can think of was Tom Brady being added when he was still playing, but that's Tom Brady. Okay. No, Anthony Davis, you can't be in there because you're still playing. If you want to be in there, retire, then maybe we'll consider you. Maybe. So no, give it to Dwight Howard.
Yeah, that's a good comment. And you saying putting Tom Brady on there, LeBron James is obviously on there. He's still playing. He would belong on that list for what he's done, being the all-time leader in points. But yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you at all, Cody. There's multiple current players on the list who I also thought, let them finish their career. I think what they've done will get them there, but let them finish their career before we call them a 75 greatest of all time.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to. I think you have to. You have to complete the painting before you show me the art, bro. Or I'm gonna be like, whoa, what about this? I'm gonna be wondering the end of the story. So.
How can you say someone is the greatest when they're not done at being possibly great? We don't know what else he could do.
He could kill his wife and a waiter. Sorry. They're just falling out of you today. That's a Norm Macdonald joke, by the way. He told that at Charles Woodson's acceptance speech. He said, "No one can ever take this away from you unless you kill your wife and a waiter."
Way to go, Norm Macdonald. That's great. So I know it being my PTI segment, I'm talking a lot about basketball because I love basketball. But what we've watched with Luka Doncic doing what he did through this season, averaging 33 points and having a great playoffs, getting his team to the finals, makes me think of his style of play and other players that have done so great. And I thought a lot about a comparison with him to Larry Bird, who was also big and slow, but absolutely dominated the league for multiple years. And I have this opinion that, it would be that Larry Bird would be able to dominate in today's era, even though today's era is so much faster and so much more athletic, that even a guy like Larry Bird, the hick from French Lick, that he'd still be able to dominate and be potentially the greatest player in the league, just as he was in the 80s. Have any thoughts on that?
Sorry, I guess I'll go first this time since I went first than you did, so I'll go again. Being more of a casual fan, I not knowing as much as you do, Dustin. Obviously, I know who Larry Bird was. I mean, I feel like you can't like sports and not know who Larry Bird was. But they're roughly the same size, right? They're roughly the same kind of type of player, same position, right? Am I right in that?
Bird was a little bit bigger. He was 6'9", Luka's 6'7", and then Bird was they have similar talents, but Bird was just, in my opinion, a little bit better at everything, and especially defense. That you take Luka and you make him 10% better at everything he does.
Right. Yeah. I think I would agree with that idea that he would be successful in today's game, but it would be an adjustment. I mean, it is different. It's a different game. Obviously, we're thinking, if he was still his prime age, not 60, whatever he is now, although he could probably still play and still dunk and do all that anyway. But given that idea, I think he would be successful, but it would have taken adjustment. He would not be immediately stepping in, boom, star. I think it'd be an adjustment, give him a year or two, and he'd be right out there on those all-star lists.
I think science disagrees with you guys all around 100%. Yeah, they're similar, but the guys playing basketball in the era that Larry Bird was playing basketball in physically are different. Look at, dude, we're talking dad bods that can jog versus athletes that look like robots that you made to be athletes. It's very different. And so, look, Larry was one of the greatest ever. He had a basketball IQ and a shot and a defensive measure that was above and beyond what was in the NBA at the time. Was it above and beyond what's in the NBA right now? No. We've had time to progress and evolve and study guys like Larry Bird and steal their techniques and stuff. And now we only eat right. We have a scientist telling us what to eat, and like it's just so different physically and to what the game is. You can now afford so much more time to being a basketball player than you could back then. Do you guys not realize that 80% of those dudes were construction workers who were good at basketball? Like, we're forgetting that these dudes took buses. Like, it wasn't the same thing, and it wasn't the same level of talent. We just like to think it was because our dads and grandpas did. But realistically, there's almost no comparison to physically what they could do to physically what these guys can do. Like, the rim should be at 14 feet now versus what it sits at because of the difference in vertical, the speed. Just look at 40 times in the NFL then, and now it's ridiculous, the difference, because people were able to prove what you could do, and then people lived up to it. So I feel like physically they would eat Larry Bird's lunch, puke it up, make him eat it, and then give it back to them on a later week in the day. But I don't think that he could physically play the same game because they're aliens then compared to what we're dealing with now. And the first player that you saw really start to look like what we see now is like Karl Malone, Michael Jordan, and this is much later after Larry Bird is like exiting his prime. So I don't think that it's the same game and that they would be physically competitive. If you could stick their brain in a robot, yes, 100%. But until then, no, it's not the same thing.
So if you're telling me that Larry Bird is a dad bod running on the court, you're telling me I've got a chance, is what you're saying. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, dude, he's a 6'9" dad bod. Have you seen him? He didn't have abs, bro. You see it. If you smack his arm, it does what my arm does at 35. I promise you that. I promise you that. It was just different. The focus wasn't the same thing, bro. Like, you weren't as focused on your body. You thought you could do blow and make movies it was just a different time, bro. It was a different time. The 60s, 70s, and 80s, you thought things were healthy that weren't as healthy. And now we just have knowledge and have been able to hone in on parts of your body that you could fix. Back then, it wasn't even a thought. People were still mad that you couldn't smoke on airplanes, Cody.
I see what you're saying. The athleticism. But at the same time, the best player in the league right now is some big fat Serbian guy who would rather play with his horses. Like,
right. But that's one of them. And that's because
he's the best of the NBA today, in today's era.
There's not multiple best. There's only one of the best.
That's subjective. Mount Rushmore. No, you're completely right. But I just feel, but also that dad bod is 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
So it's again different in that he had a 6'9" dad bod, which was back then, if we're talking inflation in size, he was a 7-footer compared to those dudes.
Yeah.
So I think that on the premise, like his mind and basketball at the time, if we have a converter, yes, he is Luka now. But if we don't, like, we have to look at it from a realistic perspective that, like, oh no, like, look how fast he would not be compared to these guys.
Good. Yeah. Good taking the other stance there and being able to argue it well. I of course was the one. I'm of course disagreeing with you, but I think it makes for a good conversation and it's fun to speculate on what it could be. Anyway, it's been a good segment and a good week. And next week Scott will be back and we'll do an NBA recap and start talking about the Olympics. Talk about that for a little bit. Finish NHL recap, and then start getting further into baseball and then prepare for football to start again as we start moving towards the fall. All right, with that, good segment, good podcast. I think that's it. Any other comments?
See you guys next week.
See you guys next week. Talk to y'all later.
See ya.